I'm a quality assurance auditor with APD, and I'm also the coordinator for OPA, the Office of Policy Analysis. So the purpose of this meeting today is to give both the public and also community groups the opportunity to provide input for policies that have been identified by OPA that are due for review. So the set of policies that we're going to review today is the use of force. And the use of force policies include the electronic control weapons, use of force reporting, supervisory investigation requirements, use of force, and an appendix that has all APD force options. So copies of the policies are at the back table that you already have there. The group behind me is the Office of Policy Analysis. So they're tasked with doing a deep analysis, looking at model policies, best practices, and hearing input from the public and community groups. So I'm going to introduce you to the members of OPA. And before I do that, the OPA is the beginning and the end of APD policy approval process. So they're just an addition to the pre-existing policy process with APD. And so any policy that begins its review starts with them and ends with them. So the members are Bill Slauson, the APD Executive Director of the Administrative Support Bureau, Major Jessica Tyler of the Albuquerque Police Academy, John Whitsitt, our Standard Operating Procedure or Policy Liaison with APD, Jenica Jacoby, Assistant City Attorney, Dr. Carlotta Garcia, who's a member of the Police Oversight Board, Ed Harness, Executive Director of the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, Miriam Verplu, who's the Data Analyst for the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, Sergeant Corey Lowe of APD, Detective Jeff Jones of APD, and a few subject matter experts that are on this panel today. It includes Advanced Training Officer Ray Fritz of the Albuquerque Police Department, Sergeant Aaron Jones from the Northwest Area Command, and Officer David Sprague from the Northeast Area Command. So that's who makes up OPA today. Other than this public meeting, there are options for the public and community groups to provide input to this committee. So on our website is at the bottom of the agenda. Our policy recommendation form is posted, and that is how either a member of the public or a community group can provide written policy proposals to this committee. What's different about this committee is that OPA will be tracking every policy recommendation that is provided to the OPA through the entire APD process. That means that any policy proposal you provide to them, you will receive a written response of whether or not your policy recommendations were adopted. And if they were not adopted, why? So that's an important part of what OPA is tasked to do. So today for the public meeting, you have a couple of options. You can make public comment, you can submit written policy proposals, or you can do both today. So if you want to include written proposals, the policy recommendation forms are on the back. Leave those with us today, and we'll take that into consideration when we review our use of force policies. The agenda is going to be pretty flexible. We'll start with public comment, then we'll go to members of ACLU, or the member of ACLU that's representing them today. Thank you for coming to talk about your policy proposals. ACLU is a community group that's actually been reviewing our use of force policies for the past few weeks. So they've already turned in their policy recommendations, and they're going to be presenting those policy proposals to us today after public comment. After their presentation, we'll see if anyone else arrives for public comment, and then we'll adjourn. As soon as we adjourn, the OPA will continue their meeting. Okay? So we'll start. Dr. Valdez. Thanks for coming. Public comment is
minimum of 2 minutes, but I'll be your indicator here in front of the podium.
A minimum or maximum?
Sorry, maximum of 2 minutes.
Well,
and then,
okay.
and okay, the committee will have a chance to do a Q&A after your comments.
Okay, great. Thank
So
you.
thank you for being here.
Okay. Thanks for having me. I'm Bill Cass. I'm a public citizen and who's also an activist. I've been following police violence for about 4 years now. And I've been to a lot of meetings, DOJ, City Hall, the City Council, community policing groups, and I've been following this for a long time. And I've come to the conclusion, and this is an ongoing situation, that if we're really going to have public, that first of all, police policy is public policy. And because it deals with public resources. And I think that means that the public has to be involved and not necessarily in control, but to certainly have a significant role in the process. And so this may sound like complaints, and that's because I have several objections to the process that's going on. I don't have some, I think the specific objections to the policies that have been developed could have been addressed if there was more public representation in the process. But let me give you examples of the lack of public involvement here. First of all, this group is, who has appointed all the members of this group? Essentially, it's APD that is in control of this group. There's a few members, there's 1 or 2 members who have a vote on this group, but predominantly the group is under control of APD. I think that should be corrected. I think the group should be under control of the public. And that means that, the mayor could take a role in this because the mayor is who the APD chief reports to, essentially, through the chief. APD is the one who's identified stakeholders. I mean, there's, the stakeholders ought to be identified by the community and not by APD itself. So there's been confusion about whether other public policy or other police policy that deals with other departments should be involved. That seems to me to be a fundamental flaw in the process. If you're going to involve the public, you must involve other agencies from outside of APD. So it's a very insular process, and I think that's, if you want to have a public process, the public has to be much more involved. This is a good example. I realize you're going to be flexible this morning because there's not very many people who are making public comment. But meetings that I've been to that are supposed to involve the public have limited the public comment to 2 minutes. Well, significant, real public comment can't be made in 2 minutes. I'm probably out of 2 minutes already. So, if you want to limit ranting by people, which is what ends up happening at the city council meetings often, I can understand that there's a necessity for a time limit. But in the case where real public input is being given, then I think you need to have a more open-ended agenda. So that's really all my message is. I would like to see a more open process, and all I can say is that there's plenty of examples of how this is a closed process inside APD. So, for example, let me give you one more example, and that is the process of submitting written comment. I searched for this. This was announced a couple of weeks ago by Bill Slauson at CPOA meeting, I believe. And it took me a while to find it. I actually called the office, and that was the only way I was able to find out where this form was available and when. So it's kind of hidden. And if you want public comment, you need to do that. You need to make this a lot more available to the public. The next thing the problem I have here is that this is essentially comments about policy that APD has already developed. There needs to be input at the front end of the process by the public, as opposed to commenting on what the public does or what the police do after the process has been started. In this group itself, as you described it, it's the front and the back end of the process. Well, the front end of the process ought to be public control. So I guess I'll end there. And if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Does anybody of the, on the committee want to, yes, we want to ask?
I have a question. So Dr. Cass, how would you design a policy development process to involve the public at a greater rate, or have the public comment as you envision it?
Well, I hope you didn't we have some history here, and that when I first started looking at this, one of the models that I looked at was Milwaukee has a model that has an actual police oversight board that is involved in public, that is involved in policy.
I didn't mean it from that standpoint.
I know you didn't.
You know the restrictions that we have here at this point.
Right.
So I'm saying within the confines of what we have now.
Okay, but this group itself could have been the mayor, for example, or could have appointed a chair to this group who's not APD. First of all, I think that a policy group that deals with APD should not be chaired by APD. They can certainly have plenty of representation, but I think there has to be real representation. I think it has to be much more balanced between public experts and not be under the control of APD. So specifics, I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you other than there has to be real a membership which is more than, 2 voting members on who are outside of APD. I mean, another thing is, if you want to make public comment or input through, say, the CPC groups, which is one of the places where I understand this policy recommendation, as I understood the presentation that Bill Clausen made the other day, are going to be submitted through the CPCs. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Well, that's an impediment to the process, because first of all, to be a member on the CPC, you have to undergo training, which is essentially police training, attending the law enforcement, the Civilian Law Enforcement Academy. That's not, that's more police influence into the process. And I've also attended a large number of CPC meetings. CPCs have not been given the support to to send this kind of information up to the police department. So I don't know if that.
So you would remove it from the control of APD, and you would have it as a separate city department or
Yes.
committee?
Well, I mean, yes, I guess it would be a separate department, just like police oversight agency is not under APD, but it's a separate entity. I mean, APD should be under civilian control. It is technically under civilian control, but practically it's not under civilian control. So yes, I would have, whether it's the chair, it would be a representative, I think, that's appointed by the mayor, who is in charge at the top of the organizational chart about APD. So yes, I would have it outside of APD, at least the structure.
Do you have any, and we appreciate your input during this process, given the policies that we're looking at today, do you have any comment that you'd like to make about improving our divorce policies?
I haven't read these in detail. I have read some of it, and of course the thing that's been objected to is the use of the word feasibility, and as opposed to reasonableness. And I think there's a valid objection in that it's essentially a new term that comes out of, it hasn't been tested to the extent I think that reasonable has been tested. But I think that's, I think that's a result of not of writing this from the standpoint of the police department. I think that's what the result of this process is that it's the police department whose concerns are put first. And I object to that, so.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
So we have a member of the ACLU, Tanya Colon, who's here, and we appreciate you coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure, come on up to the podium and I'll let everyone know all the hard work your group has been doing for the past couple of weeks. The members of ACLU agreed to review the use of force policies several weeks ago. So they've been spending that time putting together policy recommendations for all use of force policies and also citing their research. And so with your agenda packets today includes all of the policy proposals by ACLU. And the members of OPA want to thank you because your policy recommendations and the form that you filled out was thorough. You cited your research on your policy recommendations, why you feel certain recommendations should be considered for the use of force policies. And we would like to ask if we can use the recommendation form filled out by ACLU, since this is a new process, as an example for other community groups to show what this kind of dialogue exchange can do and how these forms should really be filled out. So thank you for that. Thank you.
That would be fun.
Okay. Thanks. And we've been in contact, Tanya and I, so I know that you've been doing a lot of work. So we'll give you the floor and we'll go over your recommendations. Like we said, if you want to go one by one or just in general, if you want to highlight anything, it's up to you.
Well, again, I'm Tanya Fawn. I'm the criminal justice advocate at ACLU of New Mexico. First, I want to start just with kind of reminding the public and members of this committee why we're here today, and that's the investigation the Department of Justice led, finding a pattern and practice of unconstitutional, excessive, and sometimes lethal force against citizens. And that's why it's important that we review these policies. We understand that APD is trying to do that so that they can better rebuild trust with the community. We applaud APD for its efforts to include the public in that process here today. We weren't, unfortunately, due to the tightened timeline for public comments, able to make comments on the first use of force policy before it was approved by the Department of Justice and Dr. Ginger. But we thank you for the opportunity to make comments now during the 6-month review period. We feel that's important. One of the things that the ACLU believes is that while the use of force policy has been approved by the Department of Justice and Dr. Ginger, that the policy can still be improved. And so we want to talk about some of the ways that we can, or that the ACLU at least suggests improving those policies. The ACLU submitted official comments only on 2 policies. One was the use of force 2-52, and the second was 2-53, electronic weapons. Some of the sources that we used before and while reviewing the policies, including speaking with a police practices expert, Sheriff Jerry Clayton, a 28-year criminal justice professional. He also reviewed the policies and gave us some comments and feedback which we incorporated into our written comments. We used the Guiding Principles Use of Force report published by the Public Executive Research Forum. That report was grounded in 4 national conferences: a survey of police agencies on their training of officers on force issues, field research in police agencies, not only in the United Kingdom but also in the United States, and interviews of police trainers and other personnel at all ranks, as well as experts in mental health. The result was a report which gives 30 guidelines, 30 guiding principles on the use of force, and we found that those were very persuasive and relevant to the use of force policy. We also reviewed relevant news articles, whether they were throughout the nation, because use of force is a topic that's national, not only through Albuquerque. The ACLU members, not myself personally, but members of the ACLU did go out and visit the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. along with APD to review some of their policies. So we've looked at other police policies as well to compare them to APD's. And then finally, of course, reviewing the settlement agreement between the Department of Justice and Albuquerque Police Department. I won't go through each comment individually because those are, I believe everybody has a copy of those, right? Yes. Okay. But I do want to highlight some of the main points that the ACLU found. The first has been highlighted already in the news media in Albuquerque, and that's the prevalence of the word where feasible and where possible. Where feasible is used 18 times throughout the document, much more than other police use of force policies that we reviewed. We're recommending removing the word where feasible throughout the use of force policy and removing the definition of feasibility. The purpose of this, or the reason for this recommendation, is that we feel that that word, where feasible, really waters down the department's commitment to de-escalation and does not comport to best practices. We should always emphasize using the minimal amount of force necessary to achieve lawful objectives. One of the second issues is the policy statement itself, which we feel should be sort of a mission statement for APD in regards to its use of force. And that policy statement should reflect the sanctity of human life. That should be at the very core of it. Too often, when excessive unconstitutional force and lethal force has been used against citizens, the community, the media, sometimes APD, has focused on the criminal history of the victim and blamed the victim. We believe that everybody deserves the right to be safe and has the constitutional protections against excessive use of force. And so that should be reflected in the policy statement itself. In regards to that, I want to focus on a quote from Police Chief Tom Manger from Maryland. This is quoted in the guiding principles report that we referenced. And what he said is that as a police officer, he's speaking, and he said, all of us have heard a sergeant tell us on roll call, the most important thing is that you go home safe today. And when you hear that over and over again, it almost gets to the point where we are thinking that our safety is more important than anything else, or that other people's safety is not as important as ours. To rebuild trust in the community, we want to make sure that APD reflects the values, that it respects all of its citizens. The third area regarding the use of force is that several areas of the policy are unclear or do not adequately emphasize de-escalation, minimal use of force, and again, citizen safety as priorities. One of the examples is that it is not clear or explicit in the policy that lethal force should not be used against an individual who is only a threat to himself. And we've seen that happen here before, and that was one of the instances cited in the Department of Justice findings. The definitions of active and passive resistance are inconsistent in different areas of the policy, which could lead to confusion for officers and possibly an officer training in terms of when to use force. It is not clear that electronic control weapons and OC spray should not be used on operators of vehicles in motion. In Dr. Ginger's second report, he specifically noted an example where an officer used OC spray on the operator of a driver near the entrance to an emergency room. As a result, that driver almost hit an innocent bystander. That's something that could be reflected in the policy. Open hand distraction techniques should be reportable uses of force. From our reading of the policy, it does not appear that they are. And in our citations, we have cited a lawsuit from another area of the nation where officers were sued for an open-handed distraction technique. Those are the main points that we have for the use of force policy. In regards to comments on electronic control weapons, and if I can just call them tasers, because electronic control weapons is a lot. The ACLU does not believe that the policy recognizes all the segments of populations which are vulnerable to serious injury or death as a result of the use of tasers. Tasers can sometimes be lethal. One of the reports we cite suggests that individuals who are at higher risk of serious injury or death following an ECD, a taser deployment, include persons with a slight build, persons with known heart conditions, persons in medical or mental health crisis, and persons under the influence of drugs, whether they're legal or prescription. Because of the potential for serious injury as a result of the deployment of tasers, every taser deployment should require medical evaluation after deployment. I don't believe that the policy reflects that. I think the language is something to the extent that AFD may be called out, and we would recommend that that is a requirement. The policy should require use of force reporting requirements where a taser, either through multiple applications or continuous cycling, results in exposure longer than 15 seconds. And this includes whether it's an individual officer using tasering an individual for 15 seconds or longer, or if there are multiple officers using tasers. So whether it's continuous or cumulative, such instances should be classified as a serious use of force. And I believe that the settlement agreement does classify a serious use of force as more than 2 deployments of a taser. And I did not see that reflected in the policy. Our concern really with tasers is that they can cause serious injury, and we want to make sure our officers know how and when to use them, what body parts are safer to target, what body parts they should not target, what risks are associated with them, and what positions person should not be put in after a taser deployment. All of this will better protect citizens where a taser is deployed. Those are the main comments that we have. One other thing that I did want to mention is with these policy recommendation form that was submitted. I know here, and I believe Karen stated that if any of the departments, the OPA, SOPRC, PPRB, were not going to accept any of the recommendations, that they would respond in writing. Is that correct for each area?
That's correct.
Okay, we do want to thank APD for that. We believe that's important for community transparency and to help build trust again. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Tanya. Does anyone have questions for her? Do you have her policy recommendations? So you're correct, and I do want to emphasize that part of this process is the form is structured in such a way that each policy recommendation that you provide is tracked through each step. And at the end of the process, as the use of force policies go through the entire review process, members of ACLU will receive a formal response, because if you take all the effort and time to give us the policy recommendations, this committee is going to take the same amount of time to respond to you with each one that you proposed today, whether it was adopted, and if it was not adopted, why. Yeah, and truly it's trying to, in essence, make a systematic process to turn into dialogue, and that's what we want for this process. So thank you for being here today.
If I may, could I ask a question of the committee?
Sure.
I'm just curious as to what other community stakeholders were invited to comment and if any did.
So we also invited members of the Mental Health Response Advisory Committee, or MRAC. They were really born out of the settlement agreement, so we really want them to be an integral part of this process, and invited them today as well to make comment. But we're actually, they have a meeting tonight, and we're going to go over the OPA process with them at their meeting tonight as well.
And how did the city advertise this as a public meeting?
So we posted it on the upcoming events for APD, and I believe we may have posted it on our public meeting in City Hall, and those are the 2 areas in which we posted the public meeting.
I appreciate that.
Sure,
Thank you.
sure.
I have a couple of questions. You talked about minimum use of force, and that is in the settlement agreement. And I guess I'm interested in your input, since that is different than the objectively reasonable standard that we see in case law. What would you recommend in the policy to give concrete guidance about what that means and how to implement that?
I think it should be clear that I don't think they're quite distinct, the objectively reasonable and the minimal use of force. Officers should use the minimal amount of force that's necessary to achieve the objective, and that should be clear in the policy. I'm not sure if that quite answers the question.
Okay, so you think they're the same standard?
I'm not sure I would say that they're necessarily, I guess it depends. It could be semantics, but the point and what we should be focusing on is making sure that civilians are safe. And to do that, the minimal amount of force necessary should be used. A reasonable officer in the same situation, would he have used that amount of force to achieve the objective? One of the issues that we cite as well, or one of the citations that we have in the 30 guiding principles on use of force, is that the objectively reasonable standard and Brown v. Connor is not necessarily the ceiling, but could be the floor. APD and other police officers should be encouraged not to consider that as the limit, but to ensure that they're doing everything that they can to promote safety when they are using force.
Are there any other questions for Taina?
No, I'd just like to comment. I mean, I appreciate the thoroughness that you guys reviewed the policy. Some of the areas that you found of concern were definitely things that we've identified also that could use some clarification. I think that the consistency, like the issue with requiring medical to respond when there's an ECW deployment. It is very clear in the use of force policy, but I think the language in the ECW policy might be a little bit clear. It says we will call personnel, but then it goes on to say, you know, if there's an injury present. So it could be misconstrued, I guess, when you're reading it. So anyhow, some of the things that you brought up are definitely things that we've been looking at as well. So I appreciate the time you guys took to actually do that.
Thank you, and I appreciate that you allow us to make comments on this.
Thanks, So that'll, we've heard public comment from Dr. Bill Cass and then ACLU. We appreciate you coming today. If there's anyone else that wants to make a public comment? Any other public comments? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting altogether, and OPA will meet at another time. Thank you for coming. Thanks,
Just left the meeting at the police academy and came down here to City Hall to see where this notice of this meeting, public meeting, was posted, as was reported at that meeting. And here we are at City Hall on the board where all the meetings are posted, and it's not here. That's not it. That's not it. Really? That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Not it. This is City Council. This is all to do with the City Council. Human Resources. Internal Operations. That's it.